everyone. My name is Essence Dascherry, and I am the co-chair for the marketing and events team for The Beat. I know many of you are internal here at VIACOM, but for those who might not be familiar, The Beat is VIACOM's employee resource group, and we really just provide a forum for Black employees and their colleagues across VIACOM to flourish personally and professionally. We've been working on this event for a really long time. Destiny, Natalia, and I, and the rest of the Beat group, the organization. So just want to thank all of our members for really just helping us out. And I will pass it off to Natalia.
Thank you, Essence. I'm Natalia Walker, and I'm a longstanding member of the Beat Marketing Committee. And we just want to tell you a little bit about why we decided to put this panel together. We thought that it was important to celebrate our Black tech people for being able to push boundaries and become successful in entering the tech world. And we want to be able to celebrate them and hear about their life journeys.
So I am Destiny Bishop, and I am co-chair of the Beat's social media committee, along with Esene sitting in the front. Do you just want to wave, co-chair? So I just want to remind you all that we are going to be live tweeting during this, and our Twitter handle is The Beat of Viacom. And if you're on social media, and since we're talking about tech, most of you should be, use the hashtag #CodeBlack, and we'll be sure to share your thoughts, your tweets, and everything. So I want to go ahead and introduce our amazing moderator, Kyle Berry. Kyle Berry is the Senior Vice President and Co-Chair of Viacom Labs, an incubator for the future of fan experience and engagement. In his role, Berry is tasked with generating new ideas, businesses, and opportunities that inspire creativity and innovation across the unit's various verticals. Prior to joining Viacom, Berry was Executive Vice President of the Grammy Award-winning rock band Linkin Park's proprietary company, Machine Shop Entertainment, where he helped leverage Linkin Park's global fandom and extend their brand into arenas such as tech and design. Berry also helped the brand launch Machine Shop Ventures, a venture capital fund that invests in early-to-growth stage companies, including Lyft, Hyperloop One, and Blue Bottle Coffee. He maintains an advisory role for the company. Before joining Machine Shop, Berry held roles at the Creative Artist Agency and JP Morgan in New York, London, and South Africa. Berry is the author of Stunt, Navigate the Journey, and has been a frequent guest lecturer at Harvard, UCLA, and the University of Southern California. He is also a mentor at the Startup Accelerator program, TechStars. Berry graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in economics. So without further ado, if you all can join me in welcoming Kyle
It's called Code Black, an evolution of the tech industry, because we're able to have and assemble people who are really tackling the tech industry from multiple angles. And I think that's what's really interesting, not only that there is diversity now in tech, but the types of areas that people are going into as well, and the angles in which they're coming into the tech industry are extremely diverse as well. And I think that's really exciting, and that's a celebration that we should really, hopefully get to and talk about and discuss today. But before we get into it, I want to really give the panelists an opportunity to talk a little bit further about kind of what their backgrounds are and their focuses are, just so you can get a sense for really the longevity and breadth that they've come into the industry with, and their perspective and angle in which they're tackling the tech industry as well, before we kind of get into an amazing discussion, hopefully.
Well, I'm Alvin Milton. I work as a senior JavaScript engineer at Bark & Co. You may be familiar with their product, the Bark Box. Yeah, so I work as a developer. I've been working in this field for over 10 years. I worked at a couple of cool companies, Ralph Lauren, Maxim Magazine, Complex Magazine. They're now Complex Networks. I'm now Bark.
So TJ Adeshola, I work at Twitter. I manage all of our sports relationships. So NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL. Work with those guys really closely to drive reach of their content and then to help them monetize their content. So they like me. I'm the co-chair of our affinity group, our ERG, called Blackbirds. Birds, Twitter. That coupled with my job. I've been at Twitter for about 4 years and was at ESPN prior to. So being in the tech industry for 4 years, it's a different game in the tech space, and I'm sure we all have different but similar experiences. So super excited to be here in front of you guys to talk about what that journey has looked like.
Hi everybody, my name is Jessica O. Matthews. Let's see, so I currently have two main jobs. I'm the founder and CEO of my tech startup called Uncharted Play, and I'm also the chairman of the board for a nonprofit that we created when my tech startup moved from downtown all the way uptown to Harlem, called the Harlem Tech Fund. And so in that capacity, though, it's pretty much all still my life, and to me they all relate to what I believe in terms of tech in this space. I'm a dual citizen of Nigeria and the United States. I like to highlight that just because I feel like a lot of this stuff, people are like, why are you so ambitious? I'm like, because my mom said I'm still not good enough. It is what it is. But you know what it is. But I grew up wanting to be the perfect balance of Beyonce and Bill Nye the Science Guy. Started out when I was 19, where I was fortunate enough to invent an energy generating soccer ball that basically harnesses the energy of motion and then stores that power inside of a ball so you can use it as an off-grid power source for the developing world. Over the last 10 years, I Googled the hell out of everything and became, in many ways, a self-taught mechanical engineer. Despite studying psychology and economics in school and then going to business school, I've been able to now scale that technology to be able to create motion-based kinetic technologies that power infrastructure in different emerging markets. So speed bumps and sidewalks and things like that can power street lamps and Wi-Fi. And it's exciting because from 6 years ago I thought I was just making a play product, and now I'm doing infrastructure. So for me, my story is all related to realizing that in many ways, while we may feel like we don't fit in the tech space, our experience and our perspective as people who have to overcome a lot is actually perfect for entrepreneurship and perfect for tech, and there's a huge opportunity that we can have if we really think about how we can engage and leverage that. Thanks.
Let's change places, man.
That's why you put it in the middle.
She's one of my favorite people. She knows that. So I have.
He's also on the board of the Harlem Tech Fund.
I am, and I love it. It's it's a great pleasure for me to be here. First, let me thank the Code Black team. I thought this was such a great idea, and I'm glad that there's an affinity group at VIACOM. I worked for VIACOM years ago, worked with Southern Redstone. I also would like to thank some of the folks here that are from Silicon Harlem. I got two of I have a very diverse team, and you might laugh because I had two black guys here. Well, one's from another country. Another one's born in Bronx. That's like another country too. So it's like diversity is more than just gender, and diversity is certainly much more than the skin color. So it's a lot. So these two guys think very differently. But also I have old friends here like Daphne, who I think is now back at Viacom. Daphne, where are you? Over here. And another old friend, Philip Berry. He and I have been go way back. I'm the co-founder of Silicon Harlem, and our objective is really to do exactly what you guys are trying to do here, and that is to provide access and exposure to as many people as we can about technology, about economy, about community. I've grown up pretty much in media and technology, and one of the things I used to do 3 or 4 years ago was go down to Brooklyn or downtown to all the meetups and the events, and I kept thinking to myself, why can't we do this uptown? 3 years this past April, I went on NBC. And at that time, there was zero activity happening around tech in Harlem. And I went on NBC with Tracy Strahan and talked about, boy, we have a vision where we hope someday there will be a very cohesive startup community, that people will be focused on STEM, that maybe there will be some companies that locate in Harlem that are 21st century type companies, and perhaps even have incubators and accelerators. And I can report back to these folks 3 years hence. We thought it was going to take us 15, 20 years. 3 years, every single one of those things have happened. The question becomes, once you have that, how do you sustain it? How do you keep it moving? How do you keep it growing? And it's when people like Jessica Matthews, who relocates her company into a Harlem and has put over $300,000 into our community and is hiring people and helping this community, starting a nonprofit. So that's the kind of environment we wanted to create in Upper Manhattan. And now we're pivoting to do something which I think is going to be the hardest thing I'll do in my career, which is we are also going to be providing the infrastructure to make all this work. So we are launching this summer our pilot on being an alternative to Verizon and Spectrum.
Hey.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Jackson. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Blavity. That's black in gravity, so sometimes people add like a tilde or they say like blavity, like it's not. Don't overthink it. So we are a tech and media company that is focused on empowering black millennials through written content, original video, and beautiful experiences that speak to the variety and nuance of who we are. This was incepted by our founder, who I'm sure most of you know, named Morgan Dubon. And if you've ever been to a predominantly white institution, aside from the lack of melanin, there's often a lack of spaces for people to actually share in that communal environment. Ours was a round table where everyone from freshmen to seniors would sit. Once we graduated, we dispersed, but that feeling was sort of still palpable. So Morgan's idea was to build that sort of community online, because at digital, as we were talking about here, you can create scale, and at scale, you can actually shift mindsets. And with shift mindsets, you have people building and creating things that we need. And that we can take ownership of. Recently, we launched a new brand for women, and a couple weeks ago we acquired a well-known site called Shadow and Act, which is a diasporic film site that's focused on film and media coming out of the African diaspora. My role is specifically around strategic partnerships and building relationships, both paid and non-paid, to encourage brands to think about how they talk to our specific audience, which has $162 billion of buying power, and that's just African American millennials. So that doesn't mean somebody like me, whose family's from Trinidad, because we also, as immigrants, have created bases of power in the United States. And so if you think about the traditional way in which marketing has been spoken, it has been a wide brush. And my job is to remind people that we are not a monolith, but we are monumental. And so the way in which you speak to us has to be focused on that, so we can have better conversation and deliver better content. And I'm a proud Harlem resident as well. So.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, I think, again, I'd love to get a sense, and maybe to kick off, why do we think that now, we're really seeing a lot of the progress? We've been pushing against the wall, and now I think we all agree that we're starting to open up, and there's starting to be a lot of progressive, positive things happening in the tech space, or forward progression. Why do you think now is happening?
The issue of diversity in industry is an old issue. It's nothing new. We all have to understand this. Diversity is not a problem. Diversity is an opportunity. And when we reframe the language from being a problem to an opportunity, everyone can participate. So when you frame it as a problem, some people go, that's not my problem. So 20 years ago, Jesse Jackson came to our cable conference, and I was so nervous because I didn't know if he was going to make me lose my job, essentially. But he talked about diversity. But the next thing he did, which was so profound, is he bought stock in every cable company and went to their meetings, went to their stockholder meetings, and made a big stink to where everyone started launching a diversity officer, or a diversity department, or affinity groups. 20 years later, tech industry, problem, diversity, the numbers come out. Jesse called me this time. He said, man, Clayton, what's going on? We met at the Sheraton right here in New York City. Took his shoes off, I'm looking at his bare feet going, what is this all about? And so he says, he had no tech chops, so I gave him a whole sort of download on what was happening in the tech industry with these companies and what those numbers meant, et cetera. And what did he do? He bought stock in every one of those companies, Apple, Google, et cetera, and he went to those meetings, and as a result, Apple is opening an office in Oakland. Intel devoted $300 million towards diversity. All types of companies started diversity officers. This is not new. But the good news is, as you said, Keel, things are happening, and I have to attribute some of that to that kind of leadership.
We don't view diversity in our company as something that we should do or that we simply need because that's fair. We think it's good business. I'm afraid we live in a world where the top color isn't white, it's actually green. And so, similar to what you said, there's $164 billion if you simply understand the African American market and can cater to to what they actually want and what they need. If you expand to, the international markets where most people actually look like me, if you want to break into sub-Saharan Africa with a meaningful product, if you want to break into certain parts of Latin America with a meaningful product, and be a truly global company, you cannot have the person who's leading those efforts know nothing in any true, authentic way about those markets. And so for us, it's, having a diverse team, which again means that not everyone can just look like me, because that's not just diversity. Plus, we'd all be too, all over the place. This is my job, not everybody else's job. Anyway, but to have people from the Middle East, to have people from India, to have people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, to then say, from our perspective, how do we create the Beyonce of energy companies, how do we drop a product like the Lemonade album, but for energy, and have everyone just be like, oh my God, that's what we want. And I think that having those voices at the beginning stage of the conception, it allows us to really create something meaningful. And even moving to Harlem, again, people say, oh wow, you've given so much, but we're getting so much. Now my designers, my engineers, when they walk from the subway to our office, they're seeing 10 different types of people living their lives in 10 different ways, truly a microcosm of this world, from their rabbi on 96 to their barber on 125th, and to God, if you go up even further, what's going on at City College in the 140s. I mean, it's unbelievable, and it's one of the most efficient ways to get a glimpse of the world right in front of you. And if that's diversity, I can't imagine how any company will survive in the next 10 years if they don't truly make that part of their strategy.
To kind of dovetail that, one of the things I love about social media, Twitter particularly, is that you really do see all perspectives. The power of Black Twitter has been completely undeniable. You think about what happened with Pepsi a few weeks back, right? You think about all of the social change and movements that occur. We drive culture, we drive social change, and you can't deny it. So when you have a CEO who sees this and it's in his face every day, he's like, yo, I've got to change this. I've got to go to Ferguson. I've got to develop relationships with people all across the space to make sure that my platform is reflective of the people who use it on a day-to-day basis. Regardless of in our particular case, you can't avoid it. It's in your face, and it's something that makes the platform just a better place. So collectively, we're all tasked with finding ways to leverage our networks and to make our workforce, again, more reflective of the people who use our platform on a day-to-day basis. It's not easy, but it's something that is something that is front of mind for each and every single one of us.
What's going to be the thing that sustains it? That's kind of the catalyst. Kind of how do we think about sustaining this growth of diversity in the tech space?
I think for sustainability, you need people to understand how powerful they are, and then have the opportunities and resources to actually be affirmed in that, right? So the entire reason Afrotech existed and Jessica crushed the stage was because we were tired of going, mortgage was tired of going to conferences where the first question wasn't hey, what are your MAUs? Or, how's investing going? It was how does it feel to be Black and a woman together? That's those are what type of questions are those? Frankly, we're building so many things, but the narrative to me is what has to shift, right? There's no shortage of people in my phone right now who I could call and ask about their product. There is a shortage of opportunity for them to actually get visibility around that, and the access and the tactical know-how to actually scale and grow and talk about what it looks like to build a business with X revenue, and how do you actually go from that to another space. I think for sustainability, you need to have opportunities for people to interface with people doing that work at different levels before you get there and you sort of look around and there's no one else around you, or people feel inaccessible.
There's the work, there's the action, there's the output, but then there's the narrative. And oftentimes the perception and the story that's told about what we do and how we're doing it and where we're trying to go, we often don't own it. And so when you have these platforms where we're able to actually own the narrative, speak to each other, hear kind of those first accounts, and not have it be something where someone told somebody who barely even understands our people, then is telling us, well, this is who you are, this is what we understand, what you want to do. I remember growing up being told, well, everybody who's Black, they just want to be an athlete or a rapper. And I was like, well, I don't. Are you sure? Really? Like, that doesn't relate to me at all. And then you start to have these spaces and you find that that's not true. That's simply this like sanitized, simplified story that we heard from like a tertiary source. And we all remember from school what tertiary sources are. Like, that as in like not legit at all for your paper in any way. So I think that's what's so amazing. Like when you think about even our history, being oral storytellers, passing on our knowledge by talking to each other in a very relational way. I love that we see the value in not only building these businesses, but building the places to really create that narrative and maintain that narrative.
For sure.
The good news is we can start with our young people. This has to begin at the beginning of life, essentially, is how we shape our culture and our community and our people to know that they can do whatever they want to do. So one of the things we do uptown is we've instantiated several STEM programs. There's a District 5 in Harlem with 23 schools in it and virtually no STEM being taught. And so when you hear a statistic that 1 in 8 African American males might go to college, that's absolutely true that 1 in 3 will go to jail. So if we talk about sustainability, that's sustainable right now. If we can start to capture that attention early on and get those folks knowing that that's not their path, because you go to any school, any kindergarten, any first grade, those kids, no matter what color they, wherever they are, they're curious, excited, smiling. But that curiosity can go either way. Can keep pursuing like she did and Blavity has done, just pursuing that curiosity in a positive manner, or they can go to that guy who's also very cool looking and solve that curiosity there. So we got to start very young and bring our message of diversity as an opportunity from the very, very start.
The interesting thing about that too is they just inherently have an affinity for mobile consumption and tech. I could throw a cell phone in my 4-year-old cousin's hand. He's all of pictures, videos, the whole nine. So there's certainly an intrigue and an interest there, and that's something that we've made a priority as well, like try to get to these folks as young as possible and continue to stimulate that existing interest that already exists.
Then what about on the entrepreneurial side? Maybe Jessica and Jonathan, you guys can talk about what you guys saw when raising money for your startups. I mean, you guys are one of the few Black-owned companies who've been able to raise considerable capital.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? I think when Morgan did it like this, the exciting and the I would even say shameful part is that like we're under 20 still, right? And so like you can literally count on 2 hands and then another hand the number of women who've done it. And I think like while I was elated for him what that meant for our business, the next thought was like, okay, like how long does it take for the next 15 or like the next 30 or like are we shortening the actual pipeline of like how arduous that process is for raising money in general, but then when you layer on the actual like systemic things that happen and take place, I think it becomes a different conversation. I feel like one of the things that I have been grateful for has been the level of transparency I feel like in and among the entrepreneurs that I have seen in sharing and actually just affirming each other during that process because it is debilitating.
And just to give people a sense, like what is that process like?
So I mean, it depends on like where you are beginning from and like what that looks like, frankly. Like I could tell you on our end, it was, obviously we had to prove that what we were saying was true. Like again, 3 years ago, no one knew what the word meant.
But you need to do twice as much to get half as far.
Yeah.
Like you need to prove twice as much.
Yes.
Than your,
No,
like
but
that's,
that, so to be
that's
clear,
the
she's
hard
right, like the doubling down was like, oh cool, like it looks interesting, but like, I don't know, like that is just like the, like double down some more, right?
Entrepreneurship is it's a mindset, not like a job role. So I believe that every single one of us sitting up here are entrepreneurs, and probably most of you out here are entrepreneurs, especially if you're a person of color, because you had to be incredibly innovative to figure out how to raise money just to have the clothes you have on your backs, you know what I mean? Just to get through and do what you need to do. And that's why I think that Black people are specifically suited for entrepreneurship. Like I remember in the early days of our business, before we were funded, bills would come in and we wouldn't pay them on time. And my co-founder at the time, who was not, well, actually grew up with more means than I did, was like freaking out, stressing out, just like about to rip her hair out. And I was just sitting down like, like drinking a Capri Sun, like just chilling, And she's just like, why aren't you more stressed out, Jess? I was like, girl, I'm black. Like, I literally, I just looked at her, I was like, bills on time, who cares? Like, no offense to everyone. Entrepreneurship is that hustle, right? So the issue isn't kind of like, how do we get people to be more entrepreneurial? We are born that way. To survive, we are. It's how do we make sure that, it's not 10 times harder for us to do something that our peer who isn't black is, trying to do. And we all hear those stories where someone kind of just has an idea that's barely written on a notepad and they just randomly get like a $10 million valuation, they get $1 million in funding, and we're all sitting there like, yo, I got mad notepads, like I don't understand, like I don't get it, what am I missing? And the problem is that, yes, for some company to really scale, you need to have a solid product, you need to have proof, everyone does, it doesn't matter what color you are. But in the beginning, if the person who's financing you looks like you, they can kind of see where you're going, and it's those things that aren't said. It's the things that aren't said that gets them there. So when you walk into a space where everyone is a straight white male with the money, and you are a black girl, they don't get my life as much as they try. They don't get it. They don't know, and it's not their fault. I barely get their lives, like, to be honest, so that's fine, right? We feel like before we can go in front of them and really get money, we need to have so much more figured out, because it can't just be, oh, well, you understand how I think. We do the same things. They have to really understand the product. And so I think if we're trying to pull more people into this space, that means that those of us who have been successful in any array of venues or industries need to become investors. So I feel like it's less of an issue of training people to be entrepreneurial and more about training people to be venture investors. And so how do we educate our community? Because, as Clayton said, everyone's going to play a different role. We don't just need CEOs, like we need engineers, we need lawyers, we need financiers, finance people and financiers, like we need the investors, and that's where I'm seeing the biggest issue.
And maybe Alvin, maybe you can talk to some of the mentors maybe you've seen, because obviously you've been an engineer for quite some time, and being able to stick it out and spend 10 years in the industry, when you don't see people like yourself and you're looking for people to give you guidance, kind of how has mentorship really played a role for you?
Well, actually, mentorship hasn't played that big of a role for me, to be honest. I've always had people that I've seen, in media that are in the position that I want to be in, and I always try to aspire to that. But as far as like my career, I didn't really have any mentors. I'm really self-taught. I have an associate's degree. I'm a senior engineer now, which is kind of crazy. I just worked my way up, and actually, I'm a mentor now. I work with script ed, and I teach kids how to code right now. So like, I'm trying to pay it forward because of what I didn't have.
Right.
But I think what Clayton's talking about, though, and also I guess to a point of what you're talking about is, because we're all doing something new, you're not going to find someone who is you. Like you're breaking ground. You're doing amazing things that it's very unlikely that someone before you has done exactly what you've done. But there are people who have done things adjacent. Do you know what I mean? And so I feel like, for me, it's about having like a group of 3 to 5 people who have done things in similar spaces that can at least help you not feel so lonely as you move forward. Clayton's one of my mentors. Like, he's done so much in the tech space and the media space, and like he just kind of got me before I got myself. Those are the best mentors, who see you before you see yourself. I almost feel emotional, so I'm gonna not say all that stuff. But the point is that like those are the best mentors, and we're part of a group of, West African, I don't know what we are, but, there's some amazing people on it. We got, Boz from Apple Music, we got Lovey, Ajayi, we have everybody who's doing amazing things in different industries, and yet we're all able to kind of be there for each other because we know that we're doing things that people who look like us haven't done. And I consider that mentorship.
Yeah, and everybody's encouraging each other every single day. Hey, I did this today, I did this, I'm doing this tomorrow. What are you doing? What are you doing? My mother I'm Nigerian as well, and my mother, every day when we talk, she says, remember, iron sharpens iron. Iron sharpens, so iron sharpens iron, right? So in order to keep your tools sharp, you need to make sure that the iron is getting sharpened by another piece of iron, right? And as a collective, I think that's our responsibility to each other.
Yes.
right now we've been talking about a U.S. thing, but obviously it's a global thing, and obviously the African diaspora spans the entire globe. Kind of how have you been thinking about some of the other markets and maybe tapping into people in those markets and finding ways to draw bridges?
When you think about Blackness as being global, it also starts locally. So what are those things that people are always thinking about communally, and then what are the things that are really exclusive to a community that's unique and that brings them joy, and how can we cover that in an impactful way, or how can we create an opportunity for them to tell other people about how they live and what that looks like. Because when you start a conversation, it doesn't matter if you own it. What matters is actually the platform that you have created for people to come to and to feel safe. And that, for me, is my number one thought pattern, is how do I get people to feel comfortable in who they are and share that in a space where other people will affirm them.
So we've been working with Cuba, the country, because they're so far behind in their tech infrastructure. We're also working with Haarlem, Netherlands, Haarlem. That's where Haarlem gets its name from. We're doing a tech exchange, literally a city-to-city agreement. And we're working with the Dominican Republic. And the whole point is, what I see is the world is connected. And the only way we can really make a positive move having been connected is if we're connecting with each other. There's an article about how virtual reality can solve racism. And the whole idea is a reporter covered Syria and all the craziness that's going on in Syria, but you put the goggles on and you actually put yourself in the middle of Syria and become one of the Syrians. And you really start to understand the life that they're living and what they're going through. And it just makes you a little bit more empathetic. And as our international travelers here will tell you, that everyone in the world should travel. I worked with President Clinton for a while. He would say all the time that we're pretty much all the same. 98, 95, 7% of human beings are the same. And if you travel, you drop me anywhere in the world, you can drop me anywhere, and if I said to somebody, hey, you know where I can stay? Somebody will tell me. This idea that we have to focus on our differences is starting to dumb us down. When we should be looking more positively on how we are, how much more similar we are, so we can solve the problems. Cuba is basically solving a problem called diabetes. They're solving things like cancer. But because we don't connect, we don't get to hear about it in some weird way, and hopefully we'll start to create those type of connections. So international is not an option. We are on this small planet together, and we ought to figure out how to make it work.
You know, I'm sometimes just really sad when I see African Americans here feel like they aren't welcomed by the continent, or they aren't welcomed by the broader diaspora that's outside of the United States. And I think it's honestly a really big mistake from a spiritual perspective, but also from a business perspective. Similar to what Clayton's saying, like you actually are much more similar than you think, and these people are your brothers and your sisters. And when you do go there and travel, you can expand your horizons and engage in a way that can actually make you feel more at home. So I raised a significant portion of my round, my Series A round, from African investors. Here, I'm a black woman. There, I'm just a woman. It's awesome. Like, that's like my only minority. That's awesome. Let's just put it that way. And, you know, that was meaningful to be able to engage in that way and be that much more connected, you know, to that community. And so I think in general it's important for people to realize that we now live in a world where everyone should be a global citizen, and you should be thinking about your business from a local perspective because that's the authenticity, but also not be afraid of the eventual global expansion because you probably have an ability to engage with those broader markets in a way that you never imagined.
I think one of the beautiful things about tech and Blavity and Twitter, everybody here actually can speak to. It's boundless. Like there's no such thing as boundary. There's countries and political issues and things like that, but I've launched sites where my content has touched people in different countries and stuff. So it's I can facilitate purchases in another country. It's not, you just start to transcend like the way you think about things like that.
Since you guys are breaking through a lot of times and are kind of creating and breaking new boundaries for what hopefully will be a large gap for everyone else to come through as well, can you talk about some of these breakthroughs, maybe some success story where you did have a breakthrough and where?
Probably the most proud activity we have is when we see young people come through our STEM programs, graduate and go on to college. And one quick story, we had a young lady who started with us in our summer intensive program. I knew she was smart when she walked in the door. She just had that real curiosity and sensibility, but she was not into tech. But after a few weeks, I saw her emerge as a leader in her team and really getting into it, and came from a single parent home, no one went to college, but she had talent. She goes on and gets a internship with About.com. She ends up getting a full ride scholarship to Smith College. And she emails me and says, you know what, I'm gonna major in computer science and engineering. And she wrote me 3 weeks ago and said, I just wanna thank you again, how much, I don't take any credit, but she was just saying how much she loves tech and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is great. She said, oh, by the way, I have an internship this summer, and it's with NASA in California. And I said, oh my God, she's like my new hidden figure, So that's the kind of stuff that makes us proud, because we know that's a legacy. One of the things I wanted to see happen in Upper Manhattan was how can we create a sustainable economic engine? We're still sort of working on that, but how can we make an immediate economic impact? Part of that is what we have in companies like UPlay being able to locate uptown. But the other part was, how can we get our startup community really moving in the right direction in a cohesive manner? And so we worked really hard to bring that community together through a program we called Mission Possible, which we were able to get 40 companies located in a WeWork space for free rent for a period of time and discounted rent for the rest of the year. And I only mention that because when 40 companies come into one location, the whole entire footprint around there gets an economic lift.
We recently, earlier this year, started doing a lot more distribution of web series and things like that. We had a girl who I met at an ad agency. She gave me her card. She was like, I'm working on a web series. But usually, like, the follow-up rate's like sub 20%. So I'm like, cool, you're back, whatever. She hits me up. She's like, hey, Jonathan, here's a web series. Here's where it's been featured. It's getting like all like a bunch of love. I'm like, oh, this is lit. Let me pass it on to the team. She's like, great. Pass it on to the team. She emails me back. We're like, we want the distribution, whatever. She was like, hey, just so you know, in 2015, like 6 months after you launched, you guys had a fellowship. I didn't get it, and I thought like, I wasn't good enough. But then I thought like I had an idea for a show, so I spent a year shooting, filming, writing, directing it, cutting it, using this stuff at my job to do it. Got it in 4 film festivals. Got a 750,000 views. And now I've come full circle, and you're distributing the thing that I used to think as a person wasn't good enough. And she said, the only reason that I was able to email you back is because you didn't stop building, because you not stopping made me realize it wasn't about me. I wasn't necessarily where I needed to be for that opportunity. Now I am right there. And so for me, like, that is the requirement of anybody in my position, but broadly anybody who's a leader, is you have to have that kind of space for people to expand and then re-enter on their own terms. Because now she is the director, the split is what she wants, and she can actually have a conversation about us playing a position that actually makes people take her with the level of seriousness she deserves in any room she walks into. And I think that, to me, allows us to not be at the front, but she's at the front, and we get to support her in whatever she's doing.
The biggest win is just like, oh, look, we're still in business.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of just like, but I guess I wanted to say that in a weird way, all of our, at least from a company perspective, all of our wins, we hope won't be considered wins later because we're just setting a new standard. Last year, we were really fortunate to raise the largest Series A ever raised by Black women in history. And so that was great. However, it was the average amount raised normally. So it's like, yay, we're average. But I think what we're kind of waiting for is, who will then hopefully be able to raise even more than that. There was this young girl who said that she was going to eventually one day work for Tesla and then start her own company, and she's 10 years old, and she had this amazing presentation, and she played me in a wax museum and then did all these different things, and I was like, this is insane that that this happens. But when I saw Hidden Figures, the movie, I cried and said, I wish this was around 10 years ago. I think I'd be a different person. I think I would have done things even sooner. And it's really exciting. I guess each day that we do remain a going concern as a business, each day we survive, the number of people who see that as almost a de-risking of this space, so that we as a people, again, very risk averse, will see this as something that's an opportunity and not something to be afraid of.
I'd love to be able to open it up to questions for anyone that does have a question for the panel as well right now.
If you are looking to build diverse teams, any advice on how you diversify the hiring pipeline? Because I think it often starts with hiring and then all the way through. So your thoughts on how you build and recruit diverse teams?
Yeah, I'm what I guess, for lack of better terminology, a pest internally. I've been there for almost 5 years, so I've made it a point of duty to meet each and every single hiring manager, at least with the function in my business in New York. And I've also made it a point of duty to grab a coffee a week with someone who may be interested in working at our company, or, in my opinion, I want to have you at Twitter, but if you're trying to get in tech and there's not an immediate opportunity, I'll make the phone call for you, because that's something that somebody did for me. So it's important for me to pay it forward. So in having those conversations, just making sure that I do what I can to equip people with whatever tools that they need to have that interview. The companies that are like the social ones, it's a very quirky space. You've got two white dudes who were high in a garage and they created something, and all of a sudden there's 2,000 employees, right? And our story is eerily similar to that. So you have a hiring boom, you look around and it's like, oh shit, this place is homogenous, right? And then they try to fix it retroactively, and in many cases it's too late. So for me, it's just like, try to get a coffee with somebody every week, make sure you're a pest to the hiring managers, and if you see dope people, make sure there are opportunities for dope people to do dope things.
What's next for what you're doing with VIACOM Labs, and even what what Beat is doing, and how can maybe even people in this room support in any way if possible?
Our goal is to always be the tip of the spear in terms of early stage technologies that VIACOM as a company should always be aware of, and then helping them sift through to find the best in class in order to create strategic partnerships with those startups and early stage companies that are potentially disrupting and thinking about the future of entertainment. When you're a large company like Viacom, obviously linear television becomes extremely important, but there are a lot of other areas. Clayton talked about virtual reality, there's augmented reality, there are chatbots, there's AI. There are a lot of interesting new niche platforms, Blavities, and things like that are coming up that we need to know about and be aware of and understand how to engage with them, but actually empowering those smaller kind of emerging tech companies to actually help us get to where we need to be in the future. So
I think the wonderful part just about the Beat and a lot of our events is that it's just curated from employees. So a lot of our ideas and our events come from employees and Beat members. So we're always just open to any ideas at any point. So if anyone ever wants to join our organization, our group as a whole, we're just open to ideas. But at the end of the day, it's always just supporting the business and just thinking, about how we can support the business. So.
Some information that came across this week, I don't know if the rest of you heard about the future of work and how in 20 years, 40% of the workforce, the jobs that are currently out there will be gone. So thinking about communities of color and what we could be doing now to prepare folks for what's about to happen, where we're going to have to be more entrepreneurial.
Let me just debunk it a little bit. That future is a worldwide future. It's not just a black thing. So everyone's being faced with jobs that are being eliminated, but new jobs that are being created. And the question, I think, baked into your answer was, how do we prepare people for those new jobs? the big gap we have right now is there's a lack of data scientists, right? There's a million jobs out there right now. So yeah, some jobs, we don't look at a total person anymore, you know, so those jobs may go away, robotics are gonna play a big part in that, but there's great new jobs coming that we have to prepare our kids for.
So how do we, in order to get the opportunities of things that are out there, how do we come from, help prop that up so those opportunities for certifications and the training and the knowledge are made available? Because we have the folks in Trinidad and Barbados and Haiti knowing how to do Snapchat, knowing how to do Instagram, but not knowing what a PMP certification is, what a Scrum Master certification is, what a project, you know, we need to get those viable informations to them so that when the opportunities are available from entrepreneur or corporate, they have the framework and the foundation to get those trainings, to get those certifications, to get the jobs, and to do the work.
Yeah. Part of this, like, I'll give you a personal anecdote, like, the disruption hit my family. So I sent my mom back to school to get her master's in nursing leadership because I said she could actually impact more people teaching than she could spending 12 hours standing up on a reconstructed knee. And so I felt like the first thing that has to happen, that's a mindset shift. That I literally had to tell a woman who has looked 25 for the last 50 years that she is better off going back and learning how to use a Macintosh. And we had to fight. We had to go through some things together that was just on us. But now she's at a point where she FaceTimed me last week, and I cried because this was like the greatest moment ever. And she like did it the right way. The camera was like, but what I'm saying is, like, for me, the beginning part is actually that mindset that this change is coming. It is worth embracing. And for me, like, the way I explained to her, I said, Mom, when you came to the country, you knew that this change was a necessary thing. You've never described it as easy. You have always described it as the future of what our family needed to look like. I'm telling you as your son, this is the future I want you to have. I need you to trust me. And I think it requires people like me and yourself to actually probably go and probably set up an infrastructure and have these conversations globally, not just about, hey, you're missing out, but like, think about the infrastructure of the island. We're talking about countries that are actually on the precipice of actually economic boom, right? Trinidad has oil. There's a lot of things that are obviously being harvested. The problem is they don't see their worth up front, and so they think the only thing they can do is what they're watching, as opposed to, like, if you look at what people celebrate the Caribbean for, there is so much more, right? Carnival is the beginning, not the end. And so for me, you have to rewrite that narrative, which is why people succeeding and then other people allowing them to tell the actual story is the beginning part, because the more stories that reach there, the less of a distance people feel like exists. But I don't have that answer, but I know for my skill set, that is what I'm focused on, is telling more stories and providing more access so people don't feel like they're siloed and alone.
I agree on the mindset side. You know, when I hear people talk about, oh gosh, we're going to be losing jobs, and I agree with Clayton, like, this is an issue for the entire world, I keep sitting here thinking, but what's different exactly? Like, whether it was the steamships coming in, or whether it was the first, you know, Model T, everyone was just like, oh man, this is too much change, I'm gonna lose my job. But somehow, and so I'm sitting here and I'm just kind of like, the only thing constant is change. Regardless of what's happening with the change, why is it that unemployment in our community is higher than in other communities, right? So what's going on there? What are we missing out on? And it's really two sides of things. One is a mindset about education from all stages. It's not even just about how old you are. You know, it's also about kind of what's the value of education, and also what's the value of experience, internships. You know, you work in IT, so that means you have a skill set that a lot of people don't have. Create something for our people. Do you know what I mean? Go there, get it done. We all are doing the best we can to create these things. To me, when people ask me, okay, well, what are the future industries that you think people should go into? I start thinking about all the industries that are ripe for disruption, that I think we're actually very specifically tailored in terms of our experiences to really do something in. I think about material science. I think about supply chain. I know so many Jamaicans with trucks, and I'm just like, yo, scale this. What are you doing? You know, like, what's going on? I'm just kidding. keeping it super real. And like, so we have an opportunity to create our industries, to create jobs for ourselves, to hire each other, and to train each other. But if we're waiting for a group that's been benefiting on by this asymmetrical information for hundreds of years to come and again, this is not even a racial thing, this is a socioeconomic thing. And we're waiting for that, for them to come and say, yeah, I feel like sharing, good luck. That's what I think. I don't think that's the way to go.
The infrastructure of our neighborhoods all around the world are very critical. So when we talk about a Trinidad, or we talk about a Haiti, or we talk about Cuba, or any of these places, or we talk about Upper Manhattan, if your family doesn't have a strong, affordable broadband connection, you're being left behind. That means there are children that are not able to do their homework. So you walk around Harlem around 3:30, 4 o'clock, and you'll see kids hanging out in front of Starbucks and libraries trying to get their homework done on a cell phone. There's something wrong with us if we let that happen. Our slogan is everyone deserves a connection. And the main reason why people don't have a connection is affordability. Clinton says all the time, intelligence is distributed, Twitter people get ready, right? Twitter people get ready. Intelligence is distributed evenly around the world. Therefore, it's not an intelligence level issue. It's access and exposure that's not. You can go to a website called Connect Uptown and support our initiative. We hope you do.
Tweet about it too.
Tweet it out.
And to piggyback on that, just to plug something again a little bit selfishly, if you don't have power,
Go ahead.
you can't plug that Wi-Fi connection into anything anyway. So that's why
right.
we transferred from play products to infrastructure products as well. In the end, it's the things that seem the least sexy that are the most meaningful to our
That's
community. Infrastructure, supply chain, material science, supply chain especially, it's huge.
For sure. That's
Hey,
a great way, that's a great way to end the panel. Thanks so much. Thanks for everyone for coming, and hopefully this is just the start of what will be an amazing conversation and journey, to continue on the evolution of technology. Thanks so much.